Today I was thinking about how we internalize our parents' insecurities and their shortcomings and their life experiences as our own. And then we, who are technically a separate individual, start living out our lives based on our parents and their mistakes. So everyone who was born was raised by parents, or you were raised by another human being, obviously. And so when you're being raised, they don't just slip into the role of parent or caretaker and then that's it. They're an entire person who has lived out in the real world, who has an entire self-concept based on their experiences out in the real world. They know that there's like a hierarchy. There's a certain way that you get treated based on things like looks or socioeconomic status or education or what things were like for them during a certain time period. And so they will then project that onto their children, since a lot of people see their children as an extension of themselves. They don't treat the child with like individuality, or they don't teach the child that they're like one of a kind. A lot of parents treat their children like they're an extension of them. So obviously they project all of their shit onto them, including things that have spanned over the course of generations. They project that onto the child. And then the child grows up. Like, for example, say that your parent is, in a standard sense, they're ugly. They're unattractive. They have been treated like shit out in the real world and by partners, and say that they had to settle on a partner who was also unattractive because they couldn't pull the kind of partners that they wanted. And over the course of their life, they've internalized a lot of rejection and overall negative experiences due to the way they've been treated out in the real world in the hierarchy based on their looks. So they will then have a child who is in a different generation, may know different people. Child could have different experiences, but it's all a twisted attempt to protect the child. So they will remind the child all the time of their ugliness. They will make the child feel ugly and unworthy of love, because children are very vulnerable to conditioning that relies on the notion that you can take love away, that you can take nurturing away, because without it, they're dead in like a day. So children get put through this entire pipeline. It's like individualized based on which family system they're in. But all children get put through a pipeline where they have to conform to the insecurities and the fears and the standards of the parents that the parents want for them, based on this like reward punishment, giving love and affection and taking it away, making you feel worthy even of existing, or taking it away based on certain things that you could do out in the real world. I hope this makes sense. So like, say a parent who believes they're ugly and has low self-esteem, and they're programmed with all these beliefs based on their life experience. They then raise a child, and then they think that the child may have experiences like them, so they treat their child like they're ugly, and they will not have a good life unless they overcompensate for how the parents think that the child looks by like focusing on the career or focusing on the personality And then the child, who is desperate for the parent's attention, will conform themselves to whatever the parent thinks is acceptable. And so I think of somebody that I know, and how she was raised. Her mother raised her to believe that she had to be cute at all times. Otherwise, she would get treated like shit by men. Because their family didn't have anything. They were like in a trailer park. So they couldn't rely on the daughter having prospects for partners based on money or family support. So they trained their daughter to believe that she needed to be cute at all times. She needed to look like a doll, basically. She needed to basically put all of her worth as a human based on what she looked like. And never age, of course. So it creates a lot of distortions in the psyche of the person. Like, out in the real world, this person could have met like anyone, and different people come from different family programmings based on what their parents wanted the child to overcompensate for. So I'm realizing in my own life how inaccurate all of this is, but how much it destroys the person's self-esteem. Like, I realize that I can look any way I want. I can make as much money as I feel I actually need. I don't have to go overcompensate for my own family's financial mistakes by going and being a fucking CEO and like making $1 billion a year. It's not going to solve any self-esteem issues. And it's like I would be used as a drone for my parents' low self-esteem, and it's not even me. It's like I am doing their bidding for them through me. So I'm basically possessed by them and their insecurities that they didn't originate in me, so I can't process them. So I'm always going to be at a stalemate if I'm living based on my parents' insecurities and the standards that they set for me. I also realized that a lot of people, I'm starting to think everyone, because now I'm seeing this everywhere. A lot of people have a certain style, or they have a certain fashion sense, or they have a certain standard for how they look. It's not even them. It's their parents. What kind of version of themselves they think their parents would find attractive, so that the parents would give them approval, and give them love. I feel like this is why when you see people who even have like a childish sense of style, or they still dress the same way that they did when they were a child, it's because they're still trapped in childhood where their parent thought, okay, if I let my kid run out of the house looking how they regularly look, then they're going to get treated like shit by the world. People are going to think that it's going to reflect badly on us. It's going to make them think that we're like broke, or we come from a fucked up side of town, or we are from a subculture that is frowned upon. Like, say in my community, like say people who look like rednecks, or people who look ghetto, or they look like they're drug addicts or something like that. So the parents will then program the children from childhood to think that if you ever leave the house, you either have to like be dressed up. Like some kids that I grew up with, they still wear like polo shirts and khakis, like we're still going to private school, because their parents are scared that they'll get treated badly out in the world if they look normal. So the child then takes this on as their own fashion sense, because they're really just trying to get the approval of their parents. So now I'm thinking that the way that most people dress is just they're trying to like shield their inner child from the pain of being rejected by your parents or being punished by your parents. So they want to fit in with their parents' standards of what good looks are. And so people are just like dressing to impress their parents, even far into adulthood. It's the same with career. A lot of people have careers that their parents picked out for them because the parents are so worried about seeing their own insecurities and their own failures reflected in the child and having a child that basically has the same life as them. So parents who are insecure, they will force their child to have ridiculous ambitions, and set the child up for a lifestyle that is unsustainable. I feel like this is why so many people who get into these like competitive and high-paying careers and all kinds of shit, they didn't choose it, so they fail at it ultimately. And then in secret, they're alcoholics, they're addicted to cocaine, they're stressed out all the time, they don't love the partners that they have because the partners that they chose were just what the parents picked out because the parents were ashamed of their own partner choices. Like, it never ends. I feel like this is why a lot of men in particular, because men are the ones who are encouraged to overcompensate the most with their career. I feel like this is why a lot of men have midlife crises and then they burn out and they're fucking crazy underneath too. Because their real interests and their real identity and all kinds of stuff has been repressed since childhood and mutated, and they're so out of touch with themselves that they kind of just like lose themselves in their career. It's just a setup for disaster long term. A lot of girls who feel like whose mother, this is something I was thinking about too. The reason that a lot of girls are obsessed with looks and looking a certain way and it runs so deep. The reason that a lot of girls are like super judgmental of other girls and they're super just focused on looks and having a certain personality type that anyway, it's all because the mother was so insecure about her own looks, or she got treated a certain way because of how she looks, and so she raises the daughter to believe that you won't be safe out in this world unless you look a certain way, unless you take on a certain fashion sense, or unless you conform to whatever the trends are in your generation, because they change from generation to generation. I was thinking the other day how people who chase popularity are so fucking miserable because you have to upkeep a standard. You have to be obsessed with what everyone else is doing and making sure that they're obsessed with you. And a lot of people who are chasing popularity are coming from homes where the parents felt like they ain't shit. So they're overcompensating for the parents by thinking that popularity will make their parents proud and then make the parents stop. It's like a form of self-protection. So like now that I see all this stuff and how it's playing out, it loses its grip, loses its meaning. And I think of how, I don't know if I already said this, but when we say the real world, how cruel the real world really is, the real world is made up of other people who are going through their own version of the exact same shit that we all go through privately. So it's like the real world is the same as the personal world. It's just a lot of unhealed people creating beauty standards and businesses and social media platforms and public figures and social hierarchies based on their own unhealed trauma, and then people glorify it and act like It's hard to really get sucked into it when I see how inaccurate all of it is. And it's also subjective. I think about both my parents who had serious eating disorders. One, my father was a model at some point, so he had an eating disorder. And you could be rejected based on not looking perfect enough, so that creates a lot of inner turmoil about looks. My mother had an eating disorder, and they were both super thin at some point. And so I think about that's the reason why they projected all that shit onto me. And for me being fat when I was younger, they made it seem like it was the end of the world. They made it seem like it was a crisis. It wasn't even about health when I was a child. It was about looks and social mobility based on selling myself to the world based on what I look like at the time. It was about feeling... They felt so out of control in their own lives that they felt like controlling the body, controlling nurturing was... like controlling feeding yourself and caring for yourself was their form of control. And I'm realizing if I carry that shit into my adult life, I'll end up living a life that ends up like theirs. So it's like when we want to break generational curses, or we look at the way our parents aged and think that we don't want to be like them, it also means dismantling all of the standards and insecurities that we developed from them, from their own insecurities. It means seeing them and dismantling them, and then I feel like I would have a shot at a life that isn't just like programmed by my parents. Oh my fucking God. And then people are already programmed by their parents before it's reached the point of like total crisis, which usually happens in their midlife, when women become menopausal and men have like career burnout. People are usually rushing to get married and having children in their mid-20s and their early 30s, while the parents' hooks are still so deep in them. And then now they have kids, and now they're even more trapped in the family system, and now they're passing down their shit to their kids and ruining their kids' life. And then they prepare their children for what the real world is like when they are now out in the real world and setting an example for what the real world is like based on what the older generation's real world was like, which was based on their parents. I'm going for a walk.